What's up, everybody? Welcome to TrueCoach TV. I'm your host, Sam Pogue. I'm the VP of Brand at TrueCoach. I'm sitting down here in Boulder, Colorado with my excellent friend, Dr. Mike T. Nelson, one of the leading experts in metabolic flexibility. But not only that, he's just a guy that likes to bro out and get strong in the gym. He likes to travel, he likes to kiteboard, he likes to listen to fucking hard metal. Like, he's just a guy that has a shitload of education, but also loves to really help coaches and really help people make fitness simpler. So that way they can use this to where it doesn't need to be an all or nothing thing. It doesn't need to be this restrictive based thing. Let's make health and fitness simple so that way everybody can understand it. So he works with a lot, not only his own clientele of lifters and competition athletes and professional athletes, but other health professionals. But he also works with, has certifications. He teaches at collegiate level. So he's gonna be a great person to really help hone in what message should we really be helping our clients with right now during this epidemic of COVID-19 while we're in our homes. We're crushing the snack game super hard. I've never eaten more dried mangoes in my freaking life. I basically live in Thailand, right? And it's like, okay, but we got to look at what are we really working with? Because what we're finding is coaches are now not just using the gym to coach people. We have to realize that coaching is a holistic experience, right? Those of you who are in the one-on-one experience where like, yeah, I only see you 3 days a week for 1 hour. There's how many hours in a week? Like, we got to work on the other pieces because an hour workout 3 days a week is not going to solve the rest of the world of your health and fitness, right? So we're not just selling sweat angels, sets and reps. We are now coaches. We should be, have always been, but we are coaches now who are helping people develop better relationships with their health and wellness. And Dr. Mike T. Nelson is going to help bring that together for us and look at like where should we really be focusing and what are the things we should be doing to help our clients. So without further ado, Dr. Mike, how you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm gonna. All right. Let's see. I'm fixes everything. Come back.
Hold on, give me 2 seconds.
If it's on, looks like it's working again.
Okay. I forgot to plug my computer in. Which, that would be unfortunate to have this die in the middle of a thing because I'm not paying attention.
That's all right. I closed a few windows here. I don't know if that's the reason it froze or not, but we'll see. Nice. I was working fine the whole time in the intro, so I don't know what the deal was.
Yeah, I just imagine so many people are on the internet right now that
oh yeah,
we're just in for a heck of an experience.
All right, looks like it's working now though. So, cool. All right, ready whenever you are there.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start. We'll chop that in post.
Yeah, cool, man. How's it going? Thank you for the intro. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, super excited to sit down and chat with you. And I know that you had probably your own due diligence to go through and make sure that your fires were all put out and what your steps were going to be during this process. But yeah, I'm grateful that you're able to share some time with us. And, like you and I have talked about a million times, helping coaches get better and finding resources to help them level up, right? And not only do you do it educationally every day, but, we're in a time right now where there are coaches who are not scraping. They're not fighting. And so this is a great time to sharpen your sword, right? And so where can you look at, all right, where are my weaknesses as a coach? And you're finding like, oh, I'm great in the gym because I've done 15 different movement seminars, but I haven't done anything around habits, nutrition, coaching, metabolism, communicating with clients. And so I would say Dr. Mike T. Nelson's Metabolic Flexibility Cert, right?
Flex Diet Cert.
Diet.
You're right.
Yep.
You're right.
Is a great direction to go. So yeah, super pumped for him just to share with us about the direction we can give our clients going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think like what you said, the big thing now is you've got a lot of clients who were pretty good in the gym, pretty good one-on-one, had a lot of experience, but that was kind of all they did, like kind of like almost a per session type basis. And then even have some people running more of like a CrossFit group fitness model, very good with group instruction. And then now the model, like literally overnight, has just kind of shifted to being at home. So you're seeing a lot of different, training and things of that nature. And I think people have also realized that, like nutrition and recovery matters a lot, right? Which, I mean, they knew that before, but now they're like really being kind of faced with it. And I'm sure a lot of the questions, even just from some of the coaches I've communicated with, are, all of a sudden it's very nutrition focused, very stress focused. Obviously, what can you do for training and things at home? I think there's been a deluge of interesting body weight exercises, which is a whole topic in and of itself. But I think people are still kind of sort of missing the boat on nutrition, recovery, and stress, and now are just kind of being forced to deal with that in a way that they're probably not quite prepared for and just don't have the reps in based on their past experience.
Yeah, it's and so now it turns into like, okay, well, we have people who are fighting, we have people who are trying to figure out like what steps can I take and how do I get better quick. And with that being said, we're stepping into a realm where like I spend 12 years in the fitness industry and I'm still like, oh, that's being researched really heavily right now in like the grand scheme of nutrition and fitness. Like what we get by the time keto gets to the mass markets, like that's been being researched and it's being talked about for a while in other areas. And so I know you play in the research space as well. You hang out with Dr. Ben House down there and you guys look at things like that. And, let's look at what happened. Everybody's contained inside now. Where are you going with your clients? Like, what are you talking to about with your clients about like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we really need to be focusing on beyond, because we're not getting the stress from the gym and shit just got turned upside down. How did you approach your clients?
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. Like all my online clients, I do all their training, I do all their nutrition, I do all their stress, whether it's lifestyle, measurements of HRV, things like that. So the only major thing I had to change was a lot of the training. And that was basically just what do they have access to? If you've got 2 dumbbells and a band, great. If you've only got body weight, great. For a while, some people had access to parks, some people didn't. So first week and a half was pretty crazy trying to get all that stuff trained, figured out. And then, of course, some people were able to get some equipment. So then you kind of rejigger everything again based on that. The good part is the rest of the stuff, there was small tweaks. A fair amount of people, we had to kind of drop their calories because their training volume just wasn't nearly as high as what it had been because the amount of overload they could get was different now. And I wanted to kind of hedge their bets a little bit on the lower side. So for some people, we had some pretty high carb days. So those kind of unfortunately went away.
Damn.
So trying to change those things right away. I did see a lot of monitoring of HRV, which is a way to look at stress. So I did see a lot of people were very stressed. I was a couple more than one client, like 1, 2, 3. I just had calls with them and all we talked about was just breathing, using like some RPR, reflexive performance reset, how to work on breathing, what to look like. And we kind of rejiggered some of the cardiovascular stuff too. So a few clients were like, hey, this is probably a good time to work on more of an aerobic base. In those cases, they could still get outside. They were proficient at running or they had a rower. So we kind of changed everything around to the goals for the next 6 to 8 weeks is a little bit more working on aerobic base. Yeah, you'll get some overload, things like that. So luckily from what I do, it wasn't wholesale massive changes, which I think is good. I think for a lot of other trainers, they're trying to figure out the nutrition and stress component. And the biggest thing, a tip that I can offer there is thinking more about what do you want them to focus on? It's like one of the big questions I'll ask them is, like, what do you have access to right now? And it's, some people are like, same thing I had before. Other people are a little bit more limited. So I think trying to build, just like you would do with equipment and training, right? The first question I'm going to ask is, what are kind of the constraints on your system, right? How much time do you have to train? What kind of equipment do you have? What do you like? What do you dislike? What are your goals? Kind of the same thing with nutrition. If you only have access to less fruits and vegetables, we're probably not going to have you do a time of just super high micronutrition. Maybe we'll do other things related to that. So trying to base it around there. Some people drop their protein a little bit. That was more just of an access issue that they had to it. So I usually tend to use the 0.7 times their body weight. So if they're a 200-pound person times 0.7, it's about 140 grams of protein per day. And there's some pretty good research on that. That's probably even a little bit on the higher side. So if they had a few days that dip below that, I'm probably not going to worry that much. So some people who are even on the higher end of that, more just for caloric control, kind of scaled them back down a little bit to make sure it kind of fits within their framework. And then just asking them, what do you feel like your stress is? Like being an actual human being, hey man, what's going on? Which seems kind of, I don't want to say overly simplistic, but something I think we tend to forget about, especially when a lot of stuff changes. Again, I'm fortunate I can look at their HRV and see that it, one client was looked like a downward ski slope, and I'm like, hey, I can see there's something, definitely going on. And a friend of theirs, had gotten sick. Their husband was, nearby that person. They've got a kid at home and classes and everything else. So they had just a massive amount of change over the course of a week. So I'm not going to, take them and expect that their nutrition is going to be 100%. And nor am I going to, even if they had access to a gym, try to beat the crap out of them that week either. It's like, okay, let's sit down and make a list. What are the things we can control? What are the things you can do? We kind of stack them in a routine a little bit earlier in the day. And just a lot of it's just planning, right? Trying to figure out, oh, wow, both of you are at home now with 3 kids. Oh, the kids are normally in school. Okay. Can you talk to your wife about, can they watch the kids for this hour period of time so you can get your training done without worrying about a kid wandering through the middle of your rower session or walking under a dumbbell or stuff, stuff that I don't want to say seems simplistic, but I think it was in the past easy for us to forget a lot of those logistics, and a lot of those things kind of, get in the way of people accomplishing what they need to do, so just like, oh, I see you only got 2 training sessions in. I know you're at home. I know you're doing body weight stuff. Instead of saying, oh, you're a horrible person, why do you not do it? Just be like, hey, what happened? Oh, okay, I have 3 kids and, my wife was gone and had to go to do a job in the medical professional. And so I had to watch the 3 kids at the same time and tried doing stuff and was only able to get half of it done. Right. So I think just more logistics stuff like that is kind of more what I've been dealing with over the past couple of weeks, more so in the past, just because, everybody's schedule has just been completely changed and altered.
And you're monitoring way more data than most coaches are, just because obviously you're a doctor,
Yeah.
and you have the qualifications to do so. But for a lot of coaches, they're really just looking at sleep and stress and what kind of work
Sure.
they're doing and the nutrition that they're looking at with their clients, or at least somewhat managing some of that. What are the key things that most coaches who may be wondering what direction they should go in this setting, what are the key things they should be working on in this remote setting with their clients?
Yeah. So if I put them in big categories, I look at what's training, right? So what's the stimulus you have? What's nutrition? And then briefly, just simply recovery, right? Recovery could be everything from as far down as you want to go, from, breathing to what is your perception of stress, sleep, even light cardiovascular training, all of that kind of stuff. And even if you don't have any fancy equipment, you can just ask them hey, how do you feel your training's going? How do you feel your nutrition's going? And then do you feel like your recovery is good? Or what do you feel like your self-rated perception of stress is? And from that, you're probably going to get some pretty good information.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at training, I'm a big fan of looking to see what their performance is. That's going to give me markers on what's going on, whatever nutrition plan we're using, how well can they adhere to it? And then with the recovery, simple stuff, even if you have no technology, just write down what time did you go to bed and what time did you get up? Right? You don't even need a watch. You don't need an Oura ring. All that stuff can be helpful. But that's something you can actually control, right? So that's a better question to ask than how long did you sleep last night? Because you start getting hyper focused on that. And they're like, oh, I got up, I had to use the bathroom from, like I think 2:15 to 2:30. So that was probably 15 minutes less. So maybe it wasn't 7.5, maybe it was 7. It's like all that stuff you can't really control that much. However, you can control what time you go to bed, right? So some clients now have been having to do what I call the great sleep experiment. Since you're at home, your schedules are a little bit more flexible. Most people are working from home. Like try to go to bed as early as you can and try to bump that time even by 20, 30 minutes every night. Ideally, you'll get to the point where you'll wake up before your alarm goes off. Or if you have the luxury of having a flexible time in the morning, sleep in as long as you can and then just keep bumping your bedtime up a little bit earlier and earlier, right? So you can do things like that now that probably don't have a lot of people do that in the past just because, had to get up, had to go to work, had an hour commute, had an hour commute back. So a lot of those things have been kind of changed. So you have more freedom in areas like sleep that I would say in the past are super physiologic importance, but very, very hard from a psychologic ability to change. Now that's kind of been a little bit different, right? They have more control over that. So you can do things in the recovery area now that you probably weren't able to do as easily before.
Why? I want you to go deeper on that for me, please. You said sleep is a psychological change. What does that mean? And
I
why is
think
it
it's
hard to change our sleep?
I think it's very hard to change. So when I designed the Flex Diet Cert, like shameless self-promotion and plug,
Okay.
um, I took 8 interventions with nutrition and recovery. And my first thought was, okay, like how do I rate these things? Right? Because if I'm a trainer, I'm going, oh my God, there's 30 hours of content. Like, how do I know where to start? Right? Because you want to start with what are the big rocks. And
Mhm.
so initially I'm like, smart monkey. I'm going to do based on physiology. But anyone who's worked with any clients knows that rarely is physiology the limiting factor, right? Most of the time, it's their psychological ability to change, right? Anyone who's done any nutrition stuff with this knows that, right? So I'm like, well, I can't just throw the physiology out the window, but how do I marry the two? So I said, okay, the client's ability to change or your coaching leverage is the physiology impact times the psychological ability to change, right? So protein, for example, very high physiology component, especially for people for body comp. But you tell someone, hey, bro, I want you to eat like more food. What? But I'm trying to lose weight. Yeah, I actually want you to eat more protein. Like, wait a minute. So you want me to eat more of something? Like, yes. That once they get over the initial shock, that's relatively easy for them to do. Does it take a little work, education? Yes, absolutely. However, now if I came to you and said, oh man, I looked at your intake, you're sleeping like 6 hours a night. Dude, that's horrible. Like, you need to sleep 8 hours a night. You're like, oh shit. Right. So like instantly they think, oh my God, I got to find 2 more extra hours somewhere during my day to do this non-productive thing called sleep. Right. And what I found was it eventually you're like, okay, so I have an hour commute each way. You go through the whole schedule and you're left with, well, after the kids go to bed at 8, I've got 2 hours to relax with my spouse, watch some Netflix and go to bed. So you're telling me now that I can't relax with my spouse and watch Netflix and I just need to go to bed. You're kind of like, well, kind of, yeah. They're like, screw you. This is a horrible idea. I'm not doing this. All right. So it became almost literally at some point became a value judgment, not in a negative way, just like, okay, well, they want to change these things. Maybe you have to look at a different job, not commute as far. What are other things you can move around in your schedule? And those are really, really hard things to change. And it's in these little changed a little bit. You can go back and the schedules have been rearranged, kind of hedge your bets a little bit more in that direction where they can get a little bit more sleep. You can get to the point where they actually feel better oh, wow, I do feel a lot better when I even get an extra hour of sleep a night. Now they will start to reprioritize their own life because they realize the value of it, because to them, feeling is actually believing. So now they're like, oh, okay, this is cool. I will kind of, make some changes and some concessions there.
Yeah. And what's happening to our bodies when we start getting consecutive large sleep debts of like just not sleeping like 6 hours a night with high stress lifestyle, plus getting our ass handed to us in the gym all the time because that's what we feel we need to like ignore the other things in our life, right? Psychologically.
Yeah.
Uh, what is that doing? What happens to our bodies? What's going on? We're getting less and less sleep all the time, and more stress is packing on.
Pretty much everything goes the wrong direction. Like literally everything at some point. Um, they've done studies where they took healthy people, and I want to say it was 5 days. They slept 8 hours, and then they said, okay, you guys are going to massively sleep deprived. You're going to have 4 hours of sleep. I think it was University of Illinois, Chicago. And at the end of that, they were basically borderline diabetics. These are healthy college-age people. Now, again, pretty massive reduction of sleep by 50%. There's an acute study showing that one night of very, very short sleep, you saw changes in blood glucose and insulin. Another study where it was super cool. They left them sleep 8 hours, but in the one arm of the study, they had an alarm that went off once every hour. So they just had to wake up and hit the alarm. They didn't even have to get out of bed. They didn't have to walk around. They didn't have to do anything. But they did what they fractured their sleep once every hour. And what they found was they cut down their body's ability to use fat as a fuel by like 50%,
Oh,
right? So it drove them more to start using glucose. And you also then see changes in appetite, right? So if people are more sleep deprived, people are like, oh, but I'm up longer, I'm moving around more. Yeah, you do burn a little bit more calories, but it's very minor, but your appetite goes up. So almost everyone will eat more because their appetite is starting to become more dysregulated, right? I mean, I've done this. Like I'm tired, so I need to eat something, right? For whatever reason, that's kind of where your brain goes. So especially from body composition, recovery gets impacted, just your ability to feel well. I haven't seen any of the studies on this, but I would hazard a guess that your efficiency of getting tasks done dramatically drops, which we do know from some studies. So I think most people, if they sleep longer, they will make up that difference in efficiency during the day. I haven't seen a study that's looked at that directly. And everything just feels easier. The really hard part is that when you're really sleep deprived, your brain does not realize how sleep deprived it is. Right. So at some point, if you've been to the bar too long, I remember being in Ireland once, and we were there for St. Patrick's Day, and this guy had been there since like noon, and it's like 9 o'clock at night. We were having this discussion with him, like, "Hey man, how's it going?" He's like, "You know what? I think I drank myself sober." And he was like dead serious. I'm like, no, I can say you definitely did not. Right. But his brain, this makes sense right now. Right. So if you get really sleep deprived, like you talk to any researchers who do sleep studies, they're like, yeah, we get all these college kids who come in and like, hey man, I can make it on 4 to 5 hours a night. And we remove any stimulant, right? So no caffeine 24, 48 hours before. We put him in a dark room. We have him do just these boring tasks. And he's like 60, 70% of them just literally fall asleep in the room. Right. And these are the same people like 20 minutes before they're like, no, I'm not sleep deprived. I'm great. Right. So your perception of where you're at just gets really, really skewed also. And
yeah.
again, going back to the physiology and the psychology ability to change, that's what also makes it hard, because cognitively people go, yeah, I probably could use more sleep. I get it. But then they go, but I feel okay. 8 cups of coffee a day, that's normal, right? So it's just fascinating how the brain and your body works, and can compensate and can buffer some of those changes for a short period of time. But these are people who are doing it, chronically for months and years at a time.
Yeah, I've been working really hard on my sleep, as you know, and it's been an interesting journey to watch like how it affects things and how just a night of poor sleep the next day affects my heart rate, my HRV, and the way my
Oh yeah.
foods and and you're like, holy crap, like just, I mean, it's helpful. It doesn't mean I'm always good at it, but at least I'm aware of what's going on. But like, I've been to like, now I just got a turbinate reduction in my nose.
Oh, interesting.
And cause like Zach Couples was like, dude, go to an ear, nose and throat guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. And cause I had allergies as a kid so bad that I
Ah.
just couldn't breathe. And he's like, oh man, it's tight up there. Like I don't have a deviated septum, but it's definitely like tilted. So
Ah.
go get the balloon thing,
Yep.
the plasty, and I'm like, wow, just like breathing. Like I've been running recently because I need a fitness vehicle that's some stress that's not like I don't
Yes.
like doing burpees and crap in my
Ugh,
living room.
no.
I live on the third floor. Like my neighbors do not want me swinging kettlebells. So I go running, which is cool. Like I need
Yeah.
a little better aerobic base because mine's really shitty. But like I have a really poor lactic threshold. Like
Mm,
my heart rate spikes like within the first block. Like I may
mm,
not be the next marathoner, but like I'm not out of shape. Like I don't need to be at 140 beats a minute within 2 blocks of running at a
yeah.
jogging pace, right? And then like my quads are like lactic already within like 20 minutes of running. I'm like, ooh, they're heavy. I'm like, holy shit. And I'm like, it's hard for me to breathe. Like it's effort to breathe. It's not like
Mm,
I'm just doing nasal breathing. I'm like, dude, I'm hiking a mountain. I'm like winded. It's like it's it's hard to put it in. So it's been interesting, like going through the breathing thing and sleeping and how that all affects, and just being more conscious around like, oh, I'm tracking the quality of sleep and efforts I do with sleeping as to like what I do during the day, and that's a big thing I'm conscious around. Like if I had a glass of wine, like yeah, you're definitely gonna sleep shittier. Like you have to accept that now, right? Like you're not 21, you're not invincible. Oh, my parents were right. Don't tell them I said that.
yeah.
But yeah, there's just a lot of things. That sleep is such a crazy one. But like it sounds like from what you're saying is that, especially right now, given all the things in our life, well, sleep's kind of the linchpin of dysfunction, right? Like if we can all,
Yeah.
like, I bet the world is not overslept, right? Like,
No. This new
so,
studies that came out showed it's actually gotten worse by like 0.2 hours, I think, or something, Kurt Parsley was saying. So,
which is down to
yeah.
what, 7, 6, right?
I want to say it was in the sixes. It was sixes before, and I think it dropped even a little bit lower. But I'd have to double check the stat. But it was pretty shocking. I was like, oh,
So like you think about that right now where people are watching a lot of Netflix, a lot of stimulation, not very much sunlight, not very much movement, right? So then at night you're like, oh yeah, a bowl of Captain Crunch at 9 p.m. sounds delicious, right? Because
yeah,
it's calorically dense, it's gonna help to keep you up, and it sounds freaking delicious because it's gonna deliver all these great neurotransmitters and hormones, and life is good. And then you go sleep later and later and later. So like I think, and then the next day your decision's like, oh yeah, French toast does sound good in the morning, right? And then like I'm gonna make a deep fried Oreo or whatever it is, right? Like instead of like, no, I'm gonna stick to like eating meat and veg, and like I'll still go out and do things here once in a while, get some takeout, but like you're more responsible. It seems like sleep could really just be the facilitator to a lot of
yeah, yeah. And a big hallmark too, if people are wondering, is that a big hallmark of your circadian rhythm is kind of messed up. Is you'll normally feel kind of tired mid-afternoon-ish. Now, again, this gets messy if people using coffee and stimulants, and I love coffee, so I'm not saying you have to give it up. But if you have coffee in the morning and then you always have to have coffee between like 2 and 3 in the afternoon, something to think about. And then if you feel tired around that time, and then a little bit more tired, and then the time you normally go to bed, you start feeling awake again, that's pretty much a hallmark your circadian rhythm is kind of hosed. And another tip that I like to use for that is just get out in the morning and get some type of sunlight. No glasses if at all possible, no UV tinted contacts, that type of thing. Again, you don't need to go out and stare at the sun or do anything crazy or stupid. The receptors that pick that up are actually at the bottom part of the eye. So they're literally designed for like overhead or angled light to come into the eye. And that actually starts to re-regulate your circadian rhythm so that you're actually more awake during the day and you get more tired and sleepy at night. And that'll take, in my experience, 2 to sometimes 3 or 4 weeks if people are really dysregulated, of just getting even just 20 minutes, or even if you can only get a couple minutes, right? That's better than nothing. In the morning, a little bit earlier is going to be better. But if it's noon or any time, is going to be better than nothing. And that'll help start to re regulate that system too. And that makes a big difference.
I can 100% vouch for this. Not that anything he's saying is wrong by any means, but I used to be a heavy sunglasses wearer all the time, everywhere I went. And I used to live in Texas, so it's bright all
Yeah,
day,
I remember your blue Oakleys.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I'd wear them all the time. And so then it's like, oh, but then all of a sudden I'm never not wearing sunglasses and then I'm just going indoors. And so then you were like, oh yeah, just try not wearing sunglasses. And so like living in Boulder, we get 300 days of sun. So like
Yeah.
well, first it was like, oh shit, that thing's really bright. Like, I'm so looking at it, but I burnt my eyes a little bit when I was snowboarding as a kid, so I was really sensitive.
Sensitive, yeah.
And so then I just always became sunglasses from there, right? And then now as I've gotten better, like unless I'm driving west or east into the sun, I need to see the road. I try to not wear glasses just regularly, and just to get the sun on my face. And I tell you what, holy crap, if it did, like I noticed if I didn't get sun in the day, right? Like or like outside, like I can feel it like in my sleep. It's it got me to not have that crash at 2 p.m. Yeah, it definitely like regulated some things like by not wearing sunglasses all the time. And then now I've even moved to like trying to get all the overhead lights down like past 8 p.m. and I just have like table lamps and I use like it's super bougie and wooey, but like I love the little pink salt rock lamps.
Yeah, they were good.
In my place.
Yeah.
Like it's because I don't love direct light, right? Like I don't love a fan light, you know, a ceiling fan like on top of me.
Yeah.
Wow, like how do you see the shit? Like I want just so yeah, the light thing is a huge one, right? And so those are things, guys, that you can help your clients with to where you don't need to be this PhD in nutrition.
Yeah, it's pretty simple stuff.
Yeah, super
as long
simple.
as you know about it.
Like help, like, hey guy, like just go get a 10-minute walk without your sunglasses on, right? Like, oh, and that's gonna like, okay, like that sounds maybe easier than getting them to go to bed earlier, but maybe that helps them. Like, all right, turn the lights off earlier in the day. So at least you're not, or wear some blue blocking glasses if you're gonna watch Netflix all night.
Yep.
So, you know, like let's find some simple wins that we're going through. And I think part of it for coaches, like we forget that like, we're so busy trying to like learn programming and learn the skill of coaching and get our clients that we also still have to remember we have to keep battling through our own journey, right?
Oh,
like,
totally.
That's what we have to share, right? All of this shit that Dr. Mike researches and that you listen to him talk about like how he read this research paper. Like he's not saying that because he's trying to just like, oh, I read this. Like this is what the dude reads, right? Like sits on the couch.
I read research for fun, like literally.
I'm hearing him say it. You're like, oh yeah, you probably crushed like 20 papers today. But yeah, it's like let's work on ourselves too and use this time to work on our own things to where can we be intrinsic about what or introspective around what we're going through. You're like, oh damn, I am eating like lots of late night food and like staying up late and I'm watching a lot of Netflix or I'm not using social media within boundaries. And so you're like, oh, all right, like I'm gonna start going to bed a half hour earlier. And then it turns into like, hey guy, you just tell your clients, like they know you're a human, right? Like, hey, I started going to bed just purposefully, like get in my bed at 30 minutes earlier, whether you read or whatever, but turning off the TV and like I've noticed X, Y, and Z, right? Like now at least we can hopefully you guys come away from this conversation can hear like, oh, I have something to be conscious about, right? Like now my sleep affects this, sunshine affects this. Okay, go play with it yourself and then have that conversation with your clients around, okay, this is what I'm working on, right? Like, man, when I was training full time, like my clients loved nothing more than to see what I was working on, right? Like, oh, what are you doing now? Or what thing are you reading now? Or like, we all worked at 24 and this is the era of like, you know, progressive overload and you know, we had sleds and chains and bands and accommodating resistance and boards and you know, all of a sudden you start the clients were like, oh, you guys all bought a new toy because like the sled ran up and down the train.
Oh yeah.
Oh, look at you guys. And it's like, but it was fun, right? Like to go like, oh, we read something from, you know, Mike Robertson about speed or DeFranco and it's like, oh, let's go work on it, right? And like that's where coaches need to get to as well. Like we have to remember like that's realistically our best way to keep developing our tool is to keep developing us, right? And learning more about, all right, where am I lacking, right? Is it in like, can I be a better holistic coach? Like you don't have to be a nutrition expert, but where can you at least frame the conversation and then move them to someone that is an expert if that becomes the case, right? If that becomes where I'm like, yeah, that's not my realm. Like I've been to a number of seminars where there's a table involved and I'm like, yeah, I'm down to like practice and learn and talk, but like if I have to put someone on a table, they are not starting with right? Like if I have to even worry about a Thomas test, like no, you're gonna before I even look at you, right? Like if we even have to concern ourselves. So I think that's a big one, and I'm so happy that we're able to look at this from like, okay, coaching, where do we need to look at this? And then from a client, like let's look at sleep and I'd like you to kind of talk about metabolism a little bit and this
Yeah.
time now with what's going on. Like, yeah, I mean, I've looked at some of my steps where I sit and do this all day where I'm like, you took 75 steps today, right? You're
Oh
like, holy shit.
yeah.
Okay. Like, and what is going on now within our bodies that we need to be at least conscious around, and some things that maybe we can start going, okay, those are some markers I can at least pay attention to help me at least keep track of the big picture. Because stress is
Yeah.
over a lot of this.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of step count, right? Step count is a pretty good proxy for what's called NEAT, so non-exercise activity thermogenesis. There's a fancy word for how much do you move around, how much do you twitch, like just general movement. And the part that people forget, a lot of that is subconsciously controlled. Now you can consciously override it, of course, and a lot of it is dictated, I've realized, by environment, right? So the first couple of weeks I was in Costa Rica, Dr. Ben House for 2 weeks down there doing some education, hanging out, super fun. Had a bunch of people present some awesome research. And so when this whole thing started, we were down there and we're like, I don't know, we were pretty insulated from it. And I had talked to my parents, I talked to my family, everyone was fine. So for me at that point, I'm like, well, there isn't really anything I can do about it. My clients are fine, everything, it's good. So I just said, I'm willing to be on Facebook like 5 minutes a day. I just cut everything else out. And that was pretty good up until towards the end of the week. We heard a rumor that the airport might get closed. And so everything kind of got the shit kind of hit the fan and that kind of stuff. And we got out okay, got home and everything. And then that week, everything, at least in the US, got crazy. Some rewriting programs for clients. I had to redo an entire syllabus for teaching online because it had closed for 2 weeks, and like everything happened all at the same time. And I remember at the end of one of the third day of staying up till almost like 9 o'clock at night, trying to make sure everything is good, looking at my step count going, oh man, like for the past like 2 days, I've walked like 900 steps. I'm like, that's pretty abysmal. And my HRV had just like, dropped like a stone. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can't keep doing this. I was kind of okay to buffer it for a couple of days, but day 3, everything just like went off a cliff. So I'm like, okay, so if I'm going to continue this and all my clients are depending upon me, I probably need to make some changes. Because again, I'm used to being able to go to the gym, to walk to the store, to go get coffee, and usually trying to have a little bit more control over my schedule. So I said, okay, so I'm going to redo my routine in the morning. I'm going to get some movement, some walking in the morning, did some more aerobic training, bumped that up. Took one of my old bikes and put it on a trainer. So even if it's rainy or snowy or whatever happens, I don't have the excuse of like, oh, the weather's bad, I can't go outside and ride my bike, trying to figure out what is a way to excuse proof it. And then now
He does
I'll
live in
do those things
Minnesota,
first
for
in the
all of you
morning.
who are wondering. Like, it may be like frozen with like 12 feet of snow, for the record.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You never know what's going on. And I've driven the rower out in the middle of the street with like snowbanks around and stuff before just to see what happens. But yeah, so just redoing that. And I think the key for people listening too is that a lot of clients are at home. So like the ones that I've seen, their step count is just like plummeted. So you may have to do some conscious override. Okay, I want you to get up in the morning. I want you to do a walk outside, and then in the mid-afternoon, ideally if you can, a little bit in the evening, that'd be great too. All right, so I noticed with myself, I have to almost do consciously like 2 walks a day, and I'm only trying to hit like 8,000 steps. This is nothing heroic here. But when I'm inside, literally 99% of the time, unless I'm training in the garage, it's a big difference. So I think just using step count, most watches will do it now. Apple Watch, I have a Garmin. I think it's a good way to have a little bit of conscious check-in to see where you're at. And then if you're low, then programming something in. So I actually program for a fair majority of my clients, like step count and walking and things like that into their program. Because what I realized is if I didn't, it was just something that kind of got left. I'm like, oh, so one of the reasons they're hiring me is accountability. Maybe I should program this in, or I'll be like, hey, give me your Garmin login or send me your screenshot at the end of the week so we can see, okay, this week you hit X amount of steps. And so it's something we'll then monitor. We may play around with it, we may raise it, we may decrease it. But a lot of times just making them simply aware of it, and that it's going to be tracked, and that they have to report it to you, a lot of times that's enough just in and of itself to see a pretty big change too.
Yeah, I always, one thing I hate when people are, you see it on Instagram or Facebook and someone's like bashing like, oh yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter, 10,000 steps, or it's not going to make a difference in the big scheme. But it's like, you're looking at it from a practical, like, yeah, 10,000 steps doesn't burn enough calories to like blah, 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 right? Over in a short spurt. But like the other things that it gives you and the things that it helps with your body, like there's so many other intangible benefits to it, right?
Oh yeah.
Just the pure caloric burn, which is what I think so many people get kind of caught up with, right? Because I think some people are hearing this and going, yeah, okay, walking's cool, right? Like it's not as good as running. It's nice, but like, why don't I just do like 100 burpees every morning, right? Or 100 push-ups, 100 squats, like, and I'm all about low dose movement, right? Low,
Sure.
high volume, high frequency, low intensity throughout the day. But what's the difference between doing like a couple 10-minute walks a day and getting outside than doing like 1,000 fucking burpees in your living room?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So like one of my main interventions I use with clients is just a simple AM walk. And people are like, oh, but you're doing it fasted. You're not going to see that many more calories burned. And yeah, it's going to be a little more fat, but the total caloric burn isn't that much different. And I'm like, yeah, but there's a bunch of, like you said, there's a bunch of other benefits, right? So it's fasted. So one is easier, right? Because the question you get is, okay, so what do I do before this? I don't know, like stuff your shoes on and walk out your door. Like, oh, do I need any special supplements? No. Do I need to warm up? No. If you have to warm up before a walk, you've got other issues we really need to work on, right? Do I have to do anything else? No. Just put your shoes on and walk out your door, right? So it's easy. Ideally, no sunglasses, that type of thing, so they get the sunlight exposure. Don't, stare right at the sun. Don't be an idiot. And other things that people forget too, like eye function, right? So we're having, especially now, a lot of trainers are having a lot more video stuff than what they're used to, which is great. However, the little muscles that control that focal accommodation in the eye, just like sitting, a lot of times your hip flexors get quote unquote short or tight or whatever fancy word you want to use with it. They're just adapted to being in that shortened position. So your eyeballs, same thing happens. So in the morning when you get out, I'll tell clients to try to look far away. And if you can, try to look up at the tops of trees. So what am I doing? I'm trying to get their eyes in a different position. I'm trying to have them look really far. If you want to get super crazy, I'll tell them to play the tree game. Like try to see how many different trees you can find. Like not that you have to say, ooh, oak tree or maple tree, or like identify them. But just notice like where two trees are next to each other, like can you actually see the difference between them? Which sounds weird, but there's some interesting stuff from Japan called forest bathing, or even being in nature, whether it's a fractal pattern, whether it's the scent, whether it's movement, who knows? But all this stuff definitely helps reduction of stress. So I think by having them focus on those patterns might be more beneficial for eye movement. And then your comparison to like kind of a Metcon type thing, which, definitely has its place, can definitely be beneficial. But people forget that the adaptations you get from a Metcon or lifting weights faster is different than a pure aerobic adaptation. So everyone's all going yammering on about mitochondria and how we need more of them. These little guys that create ATP, the energy currency of the cell. They do a whole bunch of other stuff too. But people forget that the number one driver, if you want more of these mitochondria, which is good, is actually aerobic base. And that's actually not the same adaptation you're going to get from a Metcon. So if you want more mitochondria, you have to do some type of more classic aerobic type training, like cross-country skiing, a rower, maybe swimming if you're a lead athlete, probably only running, biking, versus a climber. That's probably about it, right? Some large body cyclic movement. Doing 1,000 burpees, yes, it's hard. Yes, it sucks. Will you get some benefit from it? Yes, you will, but it's a different benefit. Like a Metcon like benefit is kind of its own little thing. And so when I test a lot of people to see where their VO2 max is or where their aerobic base is, most people who report that, oh man, my energy is just really low. Like, I feel stressed a lot. Like, we monitor their HRV, their resting heart rate is high. Their aerobic base is normally just in the toilet, like 10% of our population should be. We even get them to 40 or 50%, right? They don't need to be an elite aerobic athlete. They feel like 10 times better, right? Because everything now is going to be easier. And for some people, that's starting with just a 20-minute AM walk, right? It's nothing that's super high intensity, and you can kind of progress your way up from there. So anyway, I think there's a lot of benefits to that. Last part too is that it's pretty lower intensity. So if you're doing a lot of weight training, you have access to equipment, it's not really going to mess with it. If anything, I find that people's recovery status feels better, HRV scores are a little better. Even just muscular fatigue, soreness tends to get better, whether that's movement, blood flow, who knows. Um, but if you can train really hard, I'll tell clients, do this experiment. So go to the gym, just beat the crap out of yourself. And then take the next day, if you can, like on a Saturday, and just lay around and do nothing. And then the following week, do the same thing, beat the crap out of yourself on Friday. And the next day, just do some light volume, like take like 3 walks during the day, get up, do some housework, do some chores, work in your garden, whatever. And pretty much across the board, again, it's anecdotal. People who get light movement almost always report that they feel a lot better, less soreness, less stiffness too.
Yeah, it's been, I think we're playing in such a unique game right now because we just talked about like stress and sleep plays such a large role. I think, maybe there's some people out there who might not understand what HRV is, and we're
Sure.
using this as a quantitative score to attract, where your recovery is at. And this is what kind of gives us like, okay, if you put in more stress and this number goes up or down, that gives us a feedback. So go ahead and just tell us what HRV is and why we kind of should be paying attention to it.
Yeah, so HRV is simply heart rate variability. So instead of looking at the average heart rate, we're doing some fancy math and looking at the variation of that heart rate. And in English, what we're trying to do is get an idea of what's going on with what's called your autonomic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system has 2 branches. One is the parasympathetic, kind of more the rest and digest and recovery branch. That's like the brake on your car. If I push down harder on the brake, the car is going to slow down. So as we increase parasympathetic tone, or what's called vagal tone, we push on the brake harder and the car slows down. So if we increase vagal tone, parasympathetic tone, heart rate actually goes down a little bit lower. On the other side, we have the sympathetic arm, which is more stress related, fight or flight, freeze. And that's like the gas pedal on your car. If you push down on that harder, heart rate's going to go up. And HRV tells us what is kind of our balance of those two. So typically it's done just one measurement first thing in the morning. And it says, okay, so here's kind of where your stress level of your nervous system is. And stress isn't a bad thing. It doesn't mean you want to avoid it. However, we probably want to keep an idea, just like the tachometer on your car or any warning lights that show up, like how stressed are you pushing yourself, right? And again, stress is a good thing, right? Training is a stressor. All sorts of things are stressors. But from an online perspective, especially because I don't have any other markers to see clients. I'm not watching their movement patterns. I'm not interacting with their posture. I'm not interacting with their vocal tone. Anything else that could give me some idea of what's going on with them. I'm literally going by if they have an audio or video call and what they type on a keyboard. Obviously, I can look at performance and some other metrics. So I find it helpful to see how is their body responding to everything that's going on. So like recently, I've had a couple of clients where training was good, nutrition was good, and their HRV was just like completely tanking, completely different than 2 weeks ago. So, I asked them, hey, what's going on? Oh, lots of stress related to the kids are home, all that kind of stuff. Right. So without HRV, I may not necessarily pick that up because during that week, their performance was still pretty good. It was kind of trending down a little bit, but nothing really crazy. So I like it kind of like an early warning system of, hey, their body is showing that they're a lot more stressed than usual. And I think that's what's most useful about it. It won't tell you what stressor though, right? And it won't necessarily be super predictive of acute training performance on the short term, right? So a lot of pushback I get on HRV is like, oh, haven't you read XYZ study that showed acute, performance wasn't very good with it? Like, no, prediction of performance is not very good for anything other than performance, right? Maybe vertical jump, maybe velocity-based training. All other metrics for especially strength training performance have just not shown to be very good. And everyone's had that experience, right? You've had this experience, especially you go somewhere, you travel, you stay up too late, probably drink a little too much, sleep 3 hours, and all your bros are like, oh man, we're going to the gym tomorrow. And you're just like, oh man, this sucks. I don't want to do this. You get through the warm up and all of a sudden you're feeling pretty good and you get like a huge PR, right? I mean, that's happened to just about everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But you know that you're not going to do that day in and day out, right? You know that that's probably just an acute thing that happened, right? So we can have a huge level of fatigue, and for a short period of time, we can still perform pretty good. We can't expect to do that day in and day out, right? So if I take my little Jetta and I redline it, drive into the grocery store to get toilet paper, I'm probably not going to do this every day and expect the car is going to go 300,000 miles, right? Do I get to the store a little faster doing that? Yep. Does that done repeatedly over time have a cost to it? Yep. So we're trying to keep an eye out for what is that cost that's going to be associated with that.
Man, I wish I could have gone to school for exercise science, but I had you as my professor. Because I just love how you casually, like, you have your line that kind of is like, what are you really thinking about here? Like, let's look at the big picture. And it's like, it's so just like casual. And like, I love that someone would even come at you with like, did you read this study? And I'm like, if I ever wanted to argue with you, that would not be the angle I'm choosing. Have you read this? Like, what? Who is this person trying to challenge you? Right? Like, that's not a wise decision to like, have you read, because people get really attached to, and what I love about you is that, yeah, you read the studies, but like, you're also very understanding the anecdotal evidence and experience, like does play a role in the game. That research isn't always just like acute, like HRV isn't an indicator of acute performance, right? It's also like a theoretical scientific study isn't necessarily indicative of what's actual right now could be happening, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's
Well, that's the hard part people miss, right? Because the error in the conclusion is, oh, I think there's like 2 or 3 studies now showing that HRV did not predict acute weight training type based performance. So their next conclusion then is, oh, HRV is useless. It's like, well, wait a minute. Even the studies showed that it may not be beneficial for that purpose. That doesn't mean that it has zero purpose at all, right? And I think that's kind of, but it's not. It's just like fats are good, fats are bad. No, carbs are good, carbs are bad. Like we still have trainers and fitness people arguing about what is the best macronutrient. Now all of a sudden, like protein is bad. It's like none of these are good or bad. It's like, what is the context? What are you trying to do? What is the research we have? What does it say, right? Because every study is going to be limited by the fact that you had to do a study and get it done, right? And no study will ever, so my other pet peeve is no study will ever tell us what is optimal, right? So if you came to me and said, hey man, I want to know what is the optimal protocol for, muscle hypertrophy? How do I get bigger biceps? And you could give me $4 million and I could never give you an answer to that question. However, if you said, hey bro, I've got protocol A and protocol B, and in like, experienced weightlifters, assuming we can get them all and pay for it and get everything done perfectly, could I tell you, is A better than B under those circumstances? Absolutely. Now, things in there may change, circumstances may change, it may not transfer, but I could tell you what was better under those circumstances, right? So if we always think about it, okay, is this better than what we had before? You'll get closer to that sort of mythical optimal thing. But I've seen a lot of people just get hung up on, 40 hours of research on what is like the optimal amount of carbohydrates to eat. And I'm like, just shut up and have a sweet potato, see what happens. Because it's like you could spend, one of the original periodizations of carbohydrates, I think one of the early studies was done in 1897.
Whoa.
And it was anecdotal report of athletes eating more bread before they had a competition. That was one of the earliest references in actual literature I could find. So that's well over 120 years ago. And even now, like, we're still arguing about what is the role of carbohydrates, right? Bergstrom needle is like 1963. So we've been doing biopsies of pulling muscle tissue out and looking at it in the lab for well over 50 years now. And basic stuff like, how long should we deplete carbohydrates and then replete them for maximal performance? Like stuff that's kind of a basic question. Like all the research is still split, right? So it's not like we're going to have all these answers in the next 5 to 10 years, but can we take the data we have? Does it fit with the context we have? And then what is the next thing that you should do, right? So I like the saying that research kind of gives us the direction of what we should do. And then for an individual, so an N of 1, research gives you the answer that you want, right? So for you as an individual, is giving you 40 grams more carbohydrates per day enhanced performance. That's something you can test and get a pretty certain answer on, right? Now, does that mean that that applies to every athlete on the planet? No, because it's an N of 1, right? So people kind of misconstrue both of those. They forget that they can test an individual thing, but that result only applies to them as an individual at that point.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm looking at this, and I am by far from a scientist, but if we're looking at humans as unique individuals, that would make every study we ever do, to some degree, an equal one, right? Because no person, you and I we could make a category that you and I fit in the same category, right? Yep. Right? And it's like, yeah, but you and I are nothing similar, right? Like in that setting, but like we could fit a certain category, right? That is that. And it's like, yeah, but like our bodies are so different. And that's a really extreme case. But like, even if we took 33-year-old males who have 10 years of training experience, blah, 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 it's like what my body's been adapted to over the years versus what yours has, right, is entirely different. And like, we have so many things that in our past or our DNA or that have affected, things and why we do things and what's caused those things, right? Like I briefly talked earlier about like, oh, just the structure of my breathing and that's affected my sleep. Well, like, I mean, my ethnicity definitely plays a role in that, right? Like
sure.
That airway. And then I start looking at like, oh, how did that affect evolution wise, right? And then like you brought up 50 years ago looking at biopsies, and I'm also being like, yeah, we don't really know shit because we've really only been researching it for 50, 60 years. Like,
yeah,
we don't really have a ton of knowledge. And like, you ask anybody, any real scientist that's in it, like, oh my God, the amount of variables that are in a body to like really measure like the human body or like the brain can do. We don't know anything about the brain realistically. Like, that's what we're going through. And it's like, holy shit, this thing's a unique thing. So then it turns into, as professionals who are trying to help these people, like help people develop better relationships with their health and wellness, I'm going, yeah, I don't fucking know anything, right? Like the more like you tell me about what you're reading, I'm like, yeah, okay, I just need like some big rocks. I need like, so I'm like hey, did you get 8 hours of sleep? Can we work on that? Like, can we work on getting more vegetables in our day? Can we improve the quality of our foods? Maybe that's a beneficial thing. I think people, hate on that a little too much. But like, where's the win? Because I'm very much now, and I didn't used to be this person, that if homeboy goes to Planet Fitness 3 days a week to walk on the treadmill for 40 minutes and eat the piece of pizza on the way out the door, I'm super pumped because he's never done that before. That doesn't mean he doesn't figure out, okay, that's step one, right? Or like choosing almond flour instead of conventional flour. Like, is that going to make a grand scheme difference? Maybe in an inflammatory world, function, blah, 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 your gut. But like, that's a big decision to you. And that moves the needle forward. And we've talked about decision-making and habits, and we talk about the grand picture. When we start looking at the big picture of health, and we start looking at metabolic flexibility and where we're at right now, what are some of the big rocks without getting deep in like keto or anything else? Like, where should people really kind of just like, all right, here's what I should at least pay attention to?
Yeah. And real quick on the variation I find interesting. So in studies, I always look to see what is the variation, and you'll find very high levels in some studies. So it's kind of like, can you hold the paradox of humans are very different on an individual basis, but yet we're all the same species, right? And I always think about that going back and forth, right? So how do you take generalized data, make it specific, and go back and forth on that, right? And the first question I ask is how variable is the results, right? And you can't look at just the mean to get that data. But anyway, um, I would say like the big rocks, like, so obviously I did Flex Diet Cert.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did with that, I said, okay, here's the big picture. Here's metabolic flexibility, flexible dieting. And then here's 8 interventions from that. So here's 1 hour all about, protein. And then here's, for each one of those, here's 5 specific action items. So it's granular what you can do with the actual client, right? So number 1, I'd say, was protein, right? Trying to get more protein for the average person, right? Now, lifting dude bros eating 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight go way over that. But for the average person, upping the protein is going to be a big benefit. I do think there is some benefit to fasting as long as they have an okay relationship with food and they're not super high stressed, right? If they're really high stress, so a question I'll ask them is, when you get really stressed, do you eat more or do you skip meals? And in general, if they tell me they skip meals, in my head, I'm kind of thinking maybe fasting may not be the best approach. But what I do like them to do is take one period of time for 19 to 24 hours and just do a longer fast. So don't eat anything that has calories. Right? And there's a way you can step someone into that. I think that's useful from a metabolic standpoint. I think it's useful from a psychological standpoint that, oh, wow, I normally eat at this time. I'm not really that hungry. I just kind of out of habit. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So from an awareness standpoint, I think it's super useful. Micronutrition is good, right? Eating from the rainbow, more colors, more veggies, things of that nature. It kind of boggles my mind now that people are like, oh, but I heard so-and-so say that vegetables are now bad and they're going to kill us. It's like, really? Like, only in the fitness world are people now confused about frigging vegetables. And I get it. If you're talking about a pathology and someone has gut issues and lectins, and I get it. There is a time and a place to get that granular, 100%, absolutely agree. But to the average person who puts nothing green on their plate and thinks eating from the rainbow is getting a package of Skittles at the grocery store, like, reducing vegetables probably not going to be the best idea for them, right? So eat more micronutrition. I would throw in there things people forget, like fungi, mushrooms, right? They have a lot of very interesting compounds that fruits and vegetables don't have, right? So I'd throw those in micronutrition also. We talked about NEAT, getting just more light movement. Although aerobic base training is kind of more exercise, I think that also gets forgotten about, especially with emphasis on weight training. And again, I love weight training. I think it's super beneficial, adding more muscle, adding more size, tons of benefits, no question. But I think the thing is, people think that, oh, if I only lift weights, I don't need to do anything else. Yeah, some people may be okay with that. Like, I've tested some people and their VO2 max has been fine, and they don't do a lot of aerobic training. They're probably going to be okay. Other people, not so much, right? So if you find that your energy level is lower during the day, you are getting sleep, you've got some of the other big rocks in place, and you just have a really hard time recovering from training, and you've kind of pulled back on the intensities, so you're not doing the smash myself in the face every day with 3 cups of coffee and 8 Tabatas or whatever the crazy thing is, yeah, I would definitely look at some type of aerobic base at that point. Sleep we talked about, which is hugely important. Carbohydrates, I think, get thrown under the bus a lot now, and I get nervous when I see anyone who's not doing like a ketogenic diet. If they're in like the 40 to even 100 grams of total carbs per day, I kind of view that as like sort of the metabolic no man's land. Like, you're probably not low enough to actually be in a really ketogenic state if that was your goal, but you're probably low enough to just generally feel kind of like crap. So if I can, I'll even bump carbohydrates up in those people. Most of the time they report that they feel better. People also forget that as you get more stressed, right, your body's going to naturally drift to using carbohydrates a little bit better. So if someone is super high stressed, putting them on a very low carbohydrate diet is probably not the best idea, right? And we saw this a couple of years ago with, I don't see too much now, but man, I had a whole rash of people like doing CrossFit, and they're like, hey, I'm doing CrossFit and keto. like, what? Like, how do you feel? Like, I felt great for 7 weeks, and then I felt like I got hit by a truck. I'm like, yeah, do a super high output glycolytic carbohydrate using thing, and then let's restrict the same, fuel, right? So I would say some of those are, off the top of my head, things that people can look at too. And it's pretty easy to do that. Like, you don't need a lot of technology to do any of those, right? Some way to record it. You can even go old school, pen and paper. I mean, if people have done it enough, I can look at someone's nutrition log now and get pretty darn close to even like what micronutrition they're missing, right? Just by looking at colors and knowing what's kind of associated with it. Right. So if you look at their nutrition and there's not a single green thing on there other than their St. Patrick's Day beer they had, they're probably low in magnesium. Right. And I could say almost everyone's probably low in magnesium. So that's probably an easy thing to say. Right. But some of those big things are relatively easy to see. And, small changes there can make a big difference overall, too.
How are you installing new habits or new lifestyle changes? That's inevitably the game.
Yeah.
Thing, especially right now where you're going to get the excuse of like, well, this isn't the normal life I'm going to live, right? Like, we're going to come out of this.
Exactly.
It's like, so why really make any big changes now? Because they're not going to stick. Like, it's not going to stick to the lifestyle I'm used to living. Do you deal with that at all? Or what would you say add that?
Yeah, I mean, I have literally a client I got an email from last week. So he's got some interesting stuff going on with, some thyroid stuff and some Hashimoto stuff that he's, working with his functional med doc on. So we're trying to play around with some nutrition stuff. So in his case, he's probably going to be a little bit more restrictive on things, and we're going to then have him retested via his doc and see if that makes a big difference. And now I told him, like, hey man, like, he normally travels a lot, like 80% of the time. And the hardest part he had is he'd, go out to dinner with clients. They'd go to whatever Italian restaurant. And so they would order all the gluten things they could find. He feels horrible for like 2 days afterwards, but he feels kind of, compelled because of that setting and what he's done in the past, things of that nature. And I'm like, man, yeah. wait, was that you? So I told him now, I'm like, hey man, like you're stuck at home. Like, this is like, I know there's a bunch of weird stuff going on. I know your stress level is probably going to be higher. Your clients and your customers are kind of freaking out, and you may be too. But the reality is, this is probably the best time for you to do it because you 100% control your environment right now, right? So his excuse that he had before, which is actually a real, objective thing that's hard to work through, doesn't have it anymore. Yeah. Right. So with a lot of clients, I've been kind of emphasizing, even with myself, I'm like, if I'm 100% honest, like for the past year, I've been trying to cut down to like 215. But if I look back and am I 100% honest, I just didn't care that much to be, 100% true. Yeah. It just was never that big of a priority. And then training started going well. So I'm like, screw it. I'll just stay where I was at. Mm-hmm. And then now when this happened, I'm like, well, this is like actually the absolute perfect time because I'm 100% in control of my environment. Hell, I'm in most of the same environment all the time. I have a little bit more time to do more aerobic base. And so, within 4 weeks, I, hit 214.9, right? I only had to go down 5 pounds. So it wasn't like I had to go far, right? So it can be both a pro and a con, just how you look at it. So I like trying to rephrase it in a way that's actually true of, yeah, you had all these other outside influences. Now you're really in control of your environment. And most people have the ability to make small changes to their environment. And I think that environment is something we tend to forget how much of an unconscious cue it actually has, right? And so I really noticed this. So when I was down at Dr. Ben House's place for 2 weeks there in Costa Rica, it's very nice. We stay there, we train, learn stuff. They make all the food for us. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to run the experiment for 2 weeks of, I'm just going to eat whatever they have. I'm not going to purposely try to cut down on portions. I'm still going to train most every day. And I'm not going to get on the scale once. I'm not going to measure anything. I'm not going to log anything. I'm just going to see what happens. And I came back and I lost 2 pounds, right? And so then I realized, I'm like, oh, so like environment is super important, right? Because at home, it's like, oh, yeah, I bought a whole thing of cookies. somehow disappeared in 4 days. I didn't think I ate that many cookies, but obviously I guess I did, right? Not that it's bad. So I think we tend to forget the cues that we have by our environment. If you can helicopter people out, drop them in a completely different environment, then bring them back, now you kind of gain that level of awareness. And we're kind of doing a little bit of a situation, but in reverse. So instead of people being exposed to, Bob bringing in like 8 dozen donuts every day at work or the office, now that is not there. Now clients are in more control of their environment too, and they can use that to their advantage.
And then it becomes, like you said, it's a psychology thing. Like habits are
Yes.
psychology, right? And if you guys haven't read James Clear's Atomic Habits,
That was
fantastic.
good. It was very good.
And just like, I'm not a big, like everything, I'm going to write that tactic down and that's what I'm going to do. Like I don't
Yeah.
have it stack, but like I'm a big, like big picture. Okay. I'm aware of it. And now I'm going to say, okay, I need to start installing that. How do I start working that in? Because I like to kind of go through the tinkering and the awareness of the journey as much as I can.
Totally.
Before I ask for help. But then it's very much like, okay, when I get to that point, it's like, yeah, like Lucy Hendricks had posted something about breathing and
Yes.
doing this supine 90-90 glute bridge, but with the posterior pelvic tilt and doing this diaphragmatic breathing. And so like, then like her and I did a call and I'm like, oh my God, like my thoracic spine cramped, my intercostal, I'm like, oh, because I can't breathe through my nose, I'm not used to getting that much expansion through my ribs.
Yes.
Right. And like even running, I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to nasal breathe as much as I can deeply and
Yes.
like get as much expansion as possible. I'm like, it's hard. Like it's because I
Oh yeah.
so much tissue that I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to strengthen that. Like I need to be better about just diligently like being better in the position. And then I'm like playing around, like my coach mind turns on. It's like, okay, the feet elevated 90-90 supine hip bridge, like that's a thing. But like what we're really doing is like putting the pelvis in a better position so I can expand the rib cage better, right? So like I don't have to have a chair, like the whole thing, right? It's okay, I can just be aware of this thing and I can work on this principle throughout time, right? Instead of like, if it's not the perfect scenario, I'm never gonna do it, right? Because then it's like I have to.
To me, the main benefit of that drill, and I love Lucy and Zach and all their stuff and PRI stuff, I think people forget that primarily, especially for someone who's new to it like yourself, that's an awareness drill.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And so you're putting them in more, quote unquote, a better position, optimal position to get the mechanics to do what they're supposed to do so that they can feel what those mechanics feel like, right? The goal isn't to be in that position the rest of your life to your 90, right? The goal is to get that sensation and over time translate it into other things you're doing. But if you can't get that sensation running, just like exercise, right? We got to descale it. We've got to roll it all the way back to somewhere where you're like, oh, wow, my ribs are laterally expanding. Oh, that's what that feels like. Oh, now that I know that, oh, yeah, I'm definitely missing that when I'm running. Okay, so now I've got a gap to get from here to here, but now you're aware and you've got an idea of where to go with it. Where before you're like, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's the part, like, I really like to kind of experiment and learn as I go, right? Like I've been exposed to PRI, but mostly from a bracing standpoint. I'm like, I mean, I came from I'm pretty good at bracing myself. But like from that breathe, it was like, oh, such an interesting game to start looking at. Like, let me try things. Let me learn. Ooh, that didn't feel good, or that did feel good. And I think that's something that we can do, especially like you said, we can control our environment now. That it's so important for coaches who are listening to this. Like this becomes such a dialogue, right, to have with their clients right now, to like, hey, what are you noticing yourself doing? Like, damn, I cannot get my hands out of the kid's snack drawer, right? You're like, you're around it all the time, right? And you're looking just for like, oh shit, the world is stressful. I just need some sort of dopamine. I just want some little goodness of happiness for 2 seconds. And so it's easy to get to. Like, why would we not go and get something that's easy to get happiness from all the time, conveniently? So then it turns into like, oh, I'm aware of it. So how do I facilitate making changes to help me be better at one of these big principles, right? Like Dr. Mike is saying, how do we find a better way just to get a little bit more protein in? How do we find a little bit more sleep? How can we get a little bit more sunshine, right? How can we be aware of like, how does something make us feel, right? Like you said, I didn't step on the scale. I just wanted to see how I felt, right? And oh yeah, the environment did dictate things. So being able to control the variables and look at the big picture and really step back and say, okay, yes, everything got flipped on its head right now, But the game of coaching really didn't get flipped on its head. The game of coaching just now everybody's doing the same version of it, right? And everybody's in the same epidemic of, excuse me, what's happening in the world. But like as a coach, the game, we should still be asking the same questions, right? And doing it within the level, like, am I asking my clients to give me blood, go get blood tests and give me blood reports? No, because if I have to work with anybody that's really needing that, I'm sending them to him, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, for me, it's like, okay, but I do want to go through and like, all right, what are the things I need to keep focusing on, and giving you guys tools to go, because yeah, some of you are going to hear this and go, yeah, I need to go deep down that hole because they love that, right? I keep meaning you to connect with my boy Mikey down in New Mexico.
Nice.
But you know, this is like a time that we can learn as well, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
you're not in a spot where like, okay, yeah, yeah, shit sucks, right? But like, I'm alive, I'm okay. Like, let's use this time to sharpen the blade, right? So now instead of like, yeah, I'm working on myself, to like, oh, what can I do to get better? Oh, there's time now. I can fit Con Ed in now. I've never been able to because I'm at the gym all the time. And like, oh shit, like, okay, this is very applicable to what I do, right? Understanding, oh, metabolic flexibility, how our bodies interchange between fats and carbohydrates, and how we can work with our clients to achieve the results, right? Like if you're a coach that's really hyper focused on linear results, obviously the nutrition and the habits we do outside the gym are probably the most important things you need to focus on, beyond the like, did they go 5 pounds up in their lifts, right? Because those are the wins. So yeah, what a great opportunity to look at the big picture. And I'm so pumped Dr. Mike was able to make some time for us to talk about the big picture of health, what's going on right now, what he's doing with his clients, what coaches can be doing to, you know, improve their business, but also look at like, okay, let's look at the picture so we can help ourselves, and maybe a little information to share with your clients, and then look at the opportunity for us to, you know, take that next step and get better and use this time to consistently improve. So Dr. Mike, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time, and hopefully you're safe, and I will talk with you again very soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. If people want more information, just go to miketnelson.com or flexdiet.com, FLEXDIET. Thank you so much, Sam. Greatly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Mike.